What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we are checking out the brand new Xiaomi 14T Pro. This is, of course, the latest in Xiaomi's upper mid-range T series, sort of a mid-cycle refresh and an in-between step between their top-tier flagships and their budget offerings. And this is a very popular tier for Xiaomi. In the past, the 12T Pro was really highly praised. The 13T brought about 4 years of Android updates guaranteed, and this new 14T Pro introduces AI via Google's Gemini with Circle to Search from Google and some other AI features, and a big focus on the camera setup. I'll of course go over all that stuff and everything else you need to know about the new 14T Pro, but first let's unbox it so I can show you the couple of things that come included, the important stuff that's missing. Slicing into the box and pulling off the lid here, you first get a rather thick cardboard packet that has your SIM ejector tool and then basically all the accessories that come included with the phone. Xiaomi still tosses in a case, which is nice, keeps your shiny new phone protected, and this matte black one is pretty stealthy. There's a whole bunch of paperwork that I'm totally going to read, and then a USB-A to USB-C cable for charging. I always liked these included cables from Xiaomi. They're nice, they're thick, but unfortunately, they don't come with anything to pair it with. No fast charging power brick in the box anymore, even though this phone supports some crazy fast speeds. Here is the 14T Pro itself, and you can see a few of the phone's highlights there, which we'll get into. And like I said, that's it. No charging brick or anything else hiding inside the box. So as we uncover the 14T Pro and yank off that unfortunate sticker on the back, let's talk pricing and availability. Obviously, this phone isn't available in the US, but for most of the rest of the world, the 14T Pro is priced under $1,000 in most markets and configuration options. For example, in the UK, this phone starts at about 650 British pounds. In other parts of Europe, it'll be available starting at around 799 euros, and you can spec this phone out with 12 and 16 gigs of RAM and 256, 512 gigs, or even up to 1 terabyte of storage, which is the model I have here. If you couldn't immediately tell, the 14T Pro is a pretty big smartphone. It rocks a 6.67-inch screen corner to corner with a screen-to-body ratio just shy of 90%. You get slim bezels all around, a selfie camera cutout up top. Honestly, from the front, this is a phone that definitely looks sleek and mimics most flagships. The front display glass is also totally flat, no curves or contoured edges, which I know most people prefer now, and it is a handful to hold and maneuver around with just your thumb, but I don't think anyone will complain about that when you have such a big screen to enjoy. I will say though, this is a surprisingly heavy smartphone. It's 209 grams, which is more than 10 grams heavier than Samsung's S24 Plus, so it really feels substantial. That extra weight is thanks to a thick, all aluminum frame. It's got flat sides and a brushed metal finish that matches this titanium gray color scheme. I personally love the fit and finish on this phone. The back cover still feels very much like plastic though, but whatever metallic sheen Xiaomi used here is perfect for combating smudges and fingerprints. The phone stays surprisingly clean no matter how sticky or grimy I get. Obviously, a big portion of the rear of this phone is the camera setup. There's 3 lenses and then 1 large LED flash. It's Leica branded with some Leica software add-ons that I'll talk about, but it is a very prominent multi-tier camera module that absolutely is a standout physical feature. Taking a quick look around at everything else, there's actually nothing on the left side of the phone. On the right side, your volume switch is just above the power button, which itself has this lined and divoted texture so you know which button you're pressing. A very nice touch. Up top, there's a tiny little IR blaster sensor and a couple microphone holes, and at the bottom, one of 2 loudspeakers alongside the USB-C port and the SIM card tray. Now, I'm a bit mixed about this. On the one hand, you have a dual physical SIM card setup, which is very handy. There's also eSIM, but there's no micro SD card support on this phone. However, you can get a 1 terabyte model of the 14T Pro, which is a ton of storage. There are a few flagship phones that don't even offer this. Samsung. And you will need as much storage as you can get because, man, there are a lot of pre-installed apps on this phone. Probably like 10 or 12 that I would take off right away. So I feel like this is just a bundle of pros and cons. The 14T Pro does have an in-display fingerprint sensor, which is nice, and it's very fast. In the few days that I've had this phone already, it's almost never not been able to instantly unlock. There is a screen protector pre-installed, by the way, which is great, don't get me wrong, but I always set up the same fingerprint at least twice, especially with a screen protector, just to make sure it's good. Of course, there's Face Unlock as well, so no issues whatsoever getting into this phone. And as far as that included case, it's a very thin, very flexible, sort of matte black, plasticky, rubbery case. It pops onto the phone perfectly fine. It pretty much protects all the corners and edges. It's not the highest quality case in the world, but it is a case and it is going to keep this brand new phone nice and protected. When it comes to the viewing experience, the 6.67-inch screen is an AMOLED panel with a better than average resolution of 2712 by 1220, and at 446 pixels per inch, that's a really sharp screen for something this size. And while it's not quite Quad HD, it's quite a few more pixels than the 1080p resolution you often see on phones with even a higher starting price. The AMOLED panel itself is quite nice too, and Xiaomi gives you endless options to tweak the colors to your liking. You may find the default or original color pro calibration a little dull, but I like a more natural and realistic look sometimes, and you can customize that even further under the advanced settings. One other thing you may want to enable, the 144Hz refresh rate. This is sort of a variable refresh rate in a way that you'll experience mostly with like the UI, but that can change based on the app or what the phone is doing in the moment. And it's a spec that puts this phone one pip higher than a lot of others, albeit not entirely given its limitations. Even if most people can't actually tell the difference between this and a 120Hz display. The important thing to remember though is the 144Hz refresh rate isn't always going to be available. You can set it to be used for certain apps, but a lot of games, for example, won't be running at that high refresh rate. So it's like somewhere between an over-the-top impressive screen add-on and kind of a gimmick, but it all depends on your usage and expectations. The one thing I wish was maybe a little better with the display is its brightness. The spec sheet says this phone can be set to 1600 nits and peak at 4000 nits with auto brightness, but in playing around with it, I'm setting it to like 70 or 80% brightness, and it seems a bit dim to me. That's my only complaint though. It's not the end of the world. This is a big, bold, high resolution screen on a sub $1,000 phone, and I think it's one of the top selling points for this overall. To pair with that, this phone does have dual speakers. There's the main larger one at the bottom and a secondary one within the earpiece. The secondary speaker is a little quiet, to be honest, but it's a really good, well-balanced sound even at maximum volume. Inside, Xiaomi opted to go with the new Mediatek Dimensity 9300 Plus processor to power this phone. And paired with either 12 gigabytes of RAM, like I have here, or a crazy 16 gigabytes, that's a lot of potential power for a phone like this. Here are the Geekbench scores for this chip. I don't know that I've seen a ton of performance testing yet, but let's talk about what you could expect. This is a 3rd gen 4nm processor with a high clocking core and boosts in performance aimed at taking on AI. Now, for your average everyday tasks, this is a setup that's going to slice through anything you throw at it. For gaming and other more demanding stuff, I have seen some folks say that after 30 or 40 minutes, the phone gets a bit warm, which is a tad concerning. And there's some talk of the fact that when it comes to optimization, most developers are focusing on Snapdragon first. Mediatek as a whole has been relatively highly regarded in the budget and mid-range space. And I wouldn't necessarily call this phone mid-range per se. It's like kind of sort of close to a flagship given everything it offers. But I think with the processor in particular, this is where it falls a little short by comparison to a flagship. You just have to gauge your usage though. Like if you're a non-stop gamer playing the most demanding titles for hours on end, I think you already know what phones and processor to get. But from a value standpoint, I think opting for the MediaTek processor here kept the cost down for Xiaomi and gives folks 85 or 90% of the performance potential. This chip is also intended to handle AI, and the 14T Pro offers both Gemini, which is very interesting to see, Circle to Search coming soon via Google, and a number of other in-app AI integrations like AI notes, AI subtitles, AI image editing, and more, a lot of which will roll out via software updates in the coming weeks and months. The phone itself still runs Xiaomi's Hyper OS over Android 14, so what you end up with here is a combination of Xiaomi's own funky OS experience with the inklings of AI from Google that you might otherwise expect to see on a Pixel or a Samsung. It's great to see these features hit this phone, and it's also great to see Xiaomi's further commitment to multiple years of software updates. I just sort of wonder at this point if, with the continued integration of Google AI stuff, that maybe Xiaomi starts to pivot away from their own OS experience over time. I'm also super curious to see if all things AI coming to a phone like this now sort of expands that user base more quickly, but that remains to be seen. Also powering this phone is a pretty big 5,000 milliamp battery. That'll be more than good for a day's use, but my bigger concern is the charging setup, or lack thereof. This phone supports some insane charging speeds, 120 watt wired with the right power delivery or quick charge accessories. But like you saw, you don't get any power brick in the box. Super fast charging speeds are a standout feature for these phones, and I would imagine Xiaomi wants to tell people about it and have them experience that, but evidently not. Also, this phone surprisingly adds 50 watt wireless charging too. So across the board, this is a very fast charging phone. I just don't know that most people will experience its full charging potential if they don't have the right accessories already to pair it with. Last but not least, a good chunk of the upgrades and new features for the 14T Pro come in some form or another via the camera hardware and software. Around back, the triple lens setup is made up of a 50 megapixel main lens, a 50 megapixel telephoto with 2.6 times optical zoom, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. Collectively, it's a great set of lenses that you would expect to see on something in this price tier and higher. The selfie camera up front seems to be a respectable 32 megapixel lens, and between the Leica branding across the back and the few references to Leica inside the camera app, like the Leica style selector, it's obvious that Xiaomi is continuing to emphasize the camera setup here in more ways than one, like all smartphone companies are doing nowadays. Capability-wise, I love the hardware lens setup and the zoom and focal length quick switching that takes full advantage of what's offered. There's obviously plenty of your standard shooting modes to choose from, but Xiaomi says that behind the scenes, they've done a lot on the software and photo optimization side to improve things like nighttime and low light shots. They've increased the dynamic range, reduced the noise, and a whole lot more. They're utilizing an AI/LM computational photography platform that leverages a lot of photo and video information to produce great looking pictures with enhanced depth, clarity, and boost the vibrance and overall detail. Obviously, a lot of this is, let's just say, marketing jargon, so I'm interested to see just how much better the camera setup is as a whole on a phone like this, but it really seems like Xiaomi is taking the big boy steps necessary to bring the camera setup outside this mid-range threshold and up into the upper echelon of smartphone cameras. This is where most companies are focusing all of their time and attention on right now, and I'm not surprised to see Xiaomi putting a lot of their own efforts here too. The Xiaomi 14T Pro, to me, feels like a really great balance of upper tier specs and features with a sub 4-figure price tag, and not a whole lot of compromises when you think about it. I think this phone fills that gap between their over-the-top flagships and some of their cheaper offerings, and I'm most interested to see if maybe some of the standout features, like the 144Hz display, the AI integration now, the fast charging if you utilize it, and the camera improvements, are all enough to entice people to this phone who may otherwise have defaulted to something maybe more expensive. But what do you guys think about the new Xiaomi 14T Pro? Is this a phone you'd consider buying? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this quick look and unboxing. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.